Good evening, everyone. It's Tuesday, February 11th, and this is a regularly scheduled Darien Board of Finance meeting. I'd like to call it to order. First item on the agenda, as always, is public comment. Do we have anyone that wants to speak tonight? Could just come forward. Yeah. It doesn't actually amplify in the room, but
it's okay. I can talk loud.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. My name is Christina Grimshaw, 104 Christie Hill Road. I know the Board of Education is meeting tonight, but I know part of what they're voting on is set by the budget, which you all set, so that's why I wanted to come speak to you all. I've read a lot of the materials online. I listened to your November meeting, and it's very clear that you all put a lot of time and effort and thought into all of this, and it's not easy managing a bunch of billions of dollars of expenditures. And I also understand that part of your responsibilities is to find efficiencies within the town and to make sure that the people who report up have efficiencies within their departments. But I would urge you that the restrictions that are put on the Board of Education, particularly this time and when we've had a decrease in our mill rate, are too severe, particularly when the teacher contract that was negotiated and which I understand was approved by Board of Ed and Board of Finance has a 6% increase in like health insurance and salary costs. So to ask for something far below that seems a little bit too severe. I understand from the November meeting that it was shared that schools are the #1 priority for people in town. They're why people move here. And I also understand that part of your responsibility as a Board of Finance is to look out for people like retirees who don't have students, who don't have folks in the school. But I would share that I think good schools really do impact and benefit everybody who are part of the town. They increase home values. They bring people to the town to buy houses that can contribute to the town, not just through finances, but also through becoming active members of the community, volunteering and things of that nature. So to really support and show that we do put schools first and that we're not just putting low mill rates and low taxes first, I really do think we need to show that we are invested and we're supporting an increase not just of 3 or 4%, but of what the schools really need to fund and make sure we have the qualified paras, the IDEA program, all of those sorts of things. We do, I think, as was shared, have one of the lowest mill rates in the state, definitely one of the lowest ones in Fairfield County. And I think the impacts of decreasing para support, decreasing the school's budget lower than it should be decreased, will have far-reaching effects, far more than just increasing the mill rate a few percentages. So when you get the Board of Ed's budget, I just would urge you to take a look at it with that light, and that there are many concerned parents and even principals like Paula Blakely, who's never spoke up in 20 years as an administrator, who really do care about these issues very, very deeply. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a relatively short agenda, primarily focused on preparing for the upcoming bond issue. Jen circulated as part of the packet a few different scenarios that primarily deal with refinancing some of the existing debt, about $49 million that we have outstanding in the form of short-term debt for Great Island, and then another 45 odd million of upcoming costs for the ongoing renovation of HHR. That was about $105 million cost. We bonded, I think, 33 of that, and we're looking to bond another 45 million. So, Jen, do you want to kind of walk us through what you put?
Yeah, and we have Mark Chapman here. He's our financial advisor from Golden Staff, so he can definitely answer more of the technical questions. But in my memo, I just want to call your attention to a couple of things. I originally said we were targeting April 10th for the sale date. Mark and I have been able to move that target up to April 8th, so it coincides with your budget vote. And then I had the paragraph about attachment to on HHR. I was originally thinking less 1/2 of expected state reimbursement, but the amount that's in here as the amount to be issued is minus the full expected state reimbursement. So a couple things to keep in mind. We need to do this in April of 2025 because we do have notes that are maturing and we need to be able to have $49 million that's maturing. Question for you, as always, is structure. Level principal versus level debt service. Do we want to do first principal payment right away? For the last several years, we've done maximum deferral on the first principal payment, and we have done level debt service. So that's what we've done in the past. And then just a few things to keep in mind. mind, arbitrage rules do require that we spend in a timely manner. And I have the timelines there in the memo, but for the most part, especially on Great Island, we've already expended the funds. It's just reimbursing ourselves. HHR is a little different because those are ongoing expenses. And we have to have a reasonable expectation that all the proceeds will be used within 3 years. So we have 3 scenarios. What we've been doing, because we knew Great Island and HHR were very significant amounts of money, we've been doing for the last couple of years a combination of bonds and notes so that we can roll on the debt service and try to smooth the impact in the budget. The 3 scenarios that you have, 2 of them are continue with that combo, it's just flip-flopping whether we bond Great Island or HHR. And then scenario number 3 is, what if we bonded everything right now? So kind of the big story on scenario 1, which is we continue, we roll the Great Island notes and we bond everything else. So in that case, we have a significant increase in debt service in 26 and 27. We're up about 2.2 million from 25 to 26, another 1.9 from 26 to 27. Then it starts to smooth out at 17.2 million in 2028, which is about 600,000 over 2027. And then we settle in at 17.8 for several years. We get there in fiscal 2030. Scenario 2, which is bond Great Island, do everything else's notes, is a very similar story. It ramps up about the same. They're pretty equivalent amounts of money, so it's pretty much the same story. We get to the 17.8 in 2030, 26 and 27 are the more significant increases. If we were to bond everything, from 26 to 28, we do have significant increases. We go up about 2.8 million from 25 to 26, then another 1.5 to 27, and another 1.3 to 2028. And we settle in at that 17.8, 17.9 million of debt service in fiscal 2029. Aside from the debt service, one difference between the scenarios, scenario 1 and 2 have about the same total combined cost over the life of all of this debt, which is 393 million. And if we bond everything now, we do over time, the total cost is about $2 million less. Mark has on here his rates based on current market conditions, and then looking out in 26, 27, and beyond, it's an estimate of what we think rates would be.
I essentially kept them the same because there's a lot of what ifs going on right now, so it would be more of a guess than normal based on everything that's going on.
Mark and Jen, when we compare a couple of these, the one question I had, and I think Jen, either you or I thought like our bond counsel explained it, and I couldn't find the email. But in terms of like with Great Island, is the rule that we can do a maximum of 3 ban issuances, and then we need to move into bonds?
Yes, if we can roll them this year, no pay down is required. If we bond them next year, still no pay down required,
Correct.
and we can still do a 30-year term max deferral. If we don't bond them next year, we have a 1/20th pay down that would be required, and that is, there's a disconnect with state statute and the term of the bond. You have to do a 1/20th pay down, even though we would be issuing 30-year bonds when we do issue them.
1/20th of
Of the
49.
Oh, the 49 million.
I think technically the state law is like, you can only really do it over 20 years, and they just extended the exemption for 30 years, right, for the maturity?
Right, and so they then never went back and updated that 1/20th.
It's 2 different statutes.
Yeah.
We found that out.
So if we think about, is it correct to say, like the maximum we could do on Great Island, but through the use of bans, would effectively be like almost a 6-year IO, and then 27 years of principal pay down?
IO being interest only?
Interest only, yeah.
Yeah, because we would have to reduce it by that, anything past the 36, so if we did another note and then we bonded in 26, then there's no, we can go 30 years. But if we, in 27, then you'd have to shrink it to you'd have to shrink it to 29 years.
But
So
if we
every
do
year
the-
you can go to 10 years, but you start have to, after the third one, you start have to make 1/20
Got
pay
it.
downs. Yeah.
But if we did like the kind of scenario one, which you're recommending, we'd effectively, through 3 bands, we'd be 3 IO years.
Yes,
And then we could do the
you can bond it next year. Yep,
3 years plus 27 pay down.
yeah.
Yep.
Basically scenario one,
Got it.
without any pay downs or anything.
Jim, for the record, I think you want to just reiterate why the note strategy. It's basically to help with debt service smoothing because of our shape of our curve.
Right, we've been doing a combination of notes and bonds, because if we bond everything at once, we get, max 3-year deferral on principal on all of that, and so it's all gonna hit at the same time. Utilizing notes allows us to roll in when that first debt, or that first principal payment is coming on. So scenario 1 and 2 also assume that we continue with that combo for fiscal '26, and then I think it's in fiscal '27, we have everything that remained on either
HHR,
HHR
yeah.
gets to be bonded, and then we're kind of back on a bonding strategy.
And also taking into account all of our past bonding, we're layering on top of that to create
Right.
smoothing.
Because the smoothing is a little bit difficult now that we've moved to level debt service, because we used to have declining principal. So older issues, you'd have a drop off here and there, and you could kind of slot things in and smooth it that way. But now that we have level debt service, anything that we add on is going to stack on top.
And then, and just a question on because we are under like a temporary period by which we can go 30 years. I think that was in 22, they moved it out.
I think
They
that's permanent
extended
now.
the 30 year?
It is
That's no longer
permanent, yeah.
temporary.
Oh, it's permanent
Yeah.
now? Okay.
Yeah.
And so then, Mark, I think, because we're doing 30-year on Great Island and we're doing 20-year on HHR, which I guess we technically could do 30-year on the schools, but I think we had all collectively discussed that the renovations are probably more like a 20-year asset
Right.
rather than a 30. Because the 30-year just has a longer average life and the Muni curve is always upward sloping, that's why you're showing about 15 basis points higher in sort of blended yield
Yeah,
for that one versus the HHR.
typically always, right, the last couple of years they haven't been, but yes, now we're getting back to a more typical curve, yeah.
Okay. And so the relative savings of kind of 275 for a short-term deal versus 390 for the term deal, it's a little bit bigger, but 15 basis points bigger savings relative to the HHR deal.
Right, because of the the term, yes.
So just comparing the 3 options, if you do bonds and notes either under option 1 or option 2, you're looking at a total overall P&I of 393,500,000 and change. If you bond everything right away, it's a little less, 391,000, because you start to amortize down quicker, but we do have a big spike in 2026 under scenario 3, whereas option 1 and 2 are 2.15 million, and under option 3 be 2.8 million, so it's an extra 650,000, right, in just that 1 year.
Right.
In 2026, and then in 2027, option 3 debt service would be $1,450,000 versus $1,895,000. So I guess the question is how much do you, how do you feel about paying 2.15 million next year in debt service versus 2.8 and then having it really drop?
And that's just a year-to-year change.
That's
So-
just the year to change. Mhm.
So it's going, in 27, you're up to 16, around up 16.9 million in scenario 3.
Mhm.
And scenarios 1 and 2, you're at like roughly 16.6 or 16.7.
Right.
The real hit is 28.
Mhm.
So you're gonna go up to 18 million in 28 for scenario 3
Okay.
versus, because then that's when principal hits for all 90-something million.
Right.
So in 28, in the other scenarios, we're at roughly 16.4. So it's really 28 that's the
problem.
that's the real.
Mark, the difference between the 391 and the 393 in total P&I, on a present value basis, and that's cumulative over 30 years.
Right.
That's up to 55.
Right.
Versus a spike.
I mean, do you know what the present value
I don't have
of that would
I
be?
don't-
It seems
I
to me
could
it'd
get
probably
it.
be less,
It-
not that it's insignificant, but it's probably less than $1 million on a present value basis. If it's just 2 million over 30 years on a present value basis, it's probably
Yeah, it's not a
meaningfully
lot.
less than $1 million.
It's not a lot.
So it's, to me, it's not a determining factor. It's
Okay.
really more of the debt service that we should be thinking about, not that present value difference in,
The aggregate number versus the short-term impact.
exactly.
Yeah. So I think part of it is, are we comfortable kind of rolling out, if you will, one more short-term kind of 12-month roll of half of the Great Island cost without locking it in? And if you look at that from that's about $49 million. You know, I'm not saying like we're perfectly hedged here, but if we're carrying about 35 million-ish on average with our general fund, so in terms of, you know, depending on where rates are, if rates did go up a little bit, we are a little bit protected on it. It does feel like, you know, the band strategy on Great Island, allowing us to take that larger chunk and effectively create a 6-year IO and a 27-year pay down, gets us over this hump the best.
It also preserves the flexibility of reducing the total amount of bonding if we decide to put commercial activity on the island, then to some degree, right?
Yeah, it
That's
does
not
give
a
us-
meaningful factor, but it's.
But it gives us one more year for that
Exactly.
Be
development
clarified.
plan, the master
Exactly,
plan to
for
come
that to
through.
clarify a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Right. Yeah. But either way, this bond issue will have 2 interest payments in our next.
Yes.
Yeah. And then just one question on the interest payments. Mark, did you all run this at a, like a par bonds, or did you incorporate the fact that there's probably some premiums up front, just as, because as we're thinking about interest?
Yeah, so these were run, I believe, did I not provide? I thought I provided those. So the beginning is 5% coupons.
Okay.
With dollar prices of 110, you know, so the yields are, I didn't bring those internal schedules, but, you know, 250, 270, so, but you're paying on the 5% coupon. So what's demonstrated here is what you're paying on the 5% coupon. What we've done in the last 2 years, I believe, is we've resized the transaction. So if this price is at let's say a 110, just easy math for me, you'll get 4.9 million of premium. You would, if we're doing the Great Island in bonds, and you would reduce that. You wouldn't bond, you would reduce it, so you'd get it in proceeds, not, you wouldn't have bond, it would reduce the bond by 4.9 million, which is what we've done in the last,
Right.
which helps significantly lower your interest expense.
Okay.
Where we have gotten premium the last couple of years is on the bands.
But you've kept those.
Right, we've kept
so-
that, those haven't been resized, so that's
Right.
what we've had go into the budget and then help offset debt service in the following year when it was, the interest on the notes was due.
Because we're using the premium to,
To make that more of a net, because we awarded on a net interest.
Right.
You know, that, last year, I think it was a 4% coupon with a, 2 and 3% yield. So you did receive that premium, but your net effective rate was a 3.25 or something like that.
so we're effectively capitalizing a little bit of the interest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then the sizing for, so if the consensus is to kind of go with Jen's recommended scenario 1, where we're gonna go out with, one roll Great Island, 1 more year, half of it, 1 more year, and then do 30 years, 3-year IO, and we're gonna go with a
A
term
reminder,
debt.
we bonded half of it to begin with, and this is the
Correct.
second half that we're
Right.
Yeah.
doing in bands.
So then if we're gonna go on HHR, I think, Jen, you had proposed about 45 million-ish, depending on whether, I think the state reimbursement was how much?
It's about 5.5, 5.7-ish per school, I think.
Okay, so you assumed 17 million of revenue. So would you want to recut that to, do you think make the bond size a little bit larger and assume a little bit less than the full? the full reimbursement, or?
We could, we could assume maybe half of the reimbursement because it is based on timing. Board of Ed is preparing their first submission to the state right now, but it's gonna be done in phases. They'll have multiple applications, so, we could look at putting more in for HHR.
But you're saying the reimbursement from the state will kind of come in, you think, over this year, like as we're submitting?
We'll definitely get some in this year, we'll get some in probably next year. I think Ox Ridge, we're still waiting for a very small piece, but that was maybe 3 or 4 applications over the course of a couple of years.
Yeah, it typically lags 30 to 90 days, depending what mood they're in. That's being snarky. Depends on what's, it's usually 30 to 90 days from when you.
From the application.
Application.
Yeah.
And then they do have a retainage of, I think it's 5 or 6, they've changed the number a couple times. They have a retainage fee that they hold on to the final audit,
Got it.
which is a
can
percentage
occur
of that 5 million. So
years
it's not
later.
a lot. Yeah, that could be 3 to 5 years.
So, one of the things Jenny and I looked at over the last few days was, we talked to Jen a little bit about today is, we're in a little bit of a unique environment where the taxable rate, like where we can invest and where we can even buy slugs or other things that municipalities could buy for a construction fund, is actually probably 50 basis points or so above our borrowing cost. So if we wanted to borrow a little bit more, and rather than fund out through like March, maybe go into April or May, are there ways that, because we can effectively cover our interest cost until we need the actual proceeds, are there ways that we could work with the trustee the same way that we do on a refunding to actually kind of bid out a portfolio to meet all the construction draws so that we could actually buy slugs or other things that the Fed offers?
There are companies that do that.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you get Marie Fallon in on this conversation sooner rather than later. With all the arbitrage is not our bailiwick, right? So she's going to be bond counsel gets concerned about obviously arbitrage. They want to protect you from the IRS coming in and doing all that. So I would get her involved sooner rather than later, and I can give you a name of some folks that do that they have those portfolios that they set up for it.
My understanding was just like a current refunding, or what used to be advanced refunding, buying a portfolio just to pay. I don't think we're looking to arbitrage. I think we're looking to just get the bond yield to pay the drawdowns. So that's like if in the past when we've done slugs.
Right,
for
that'll lock
current
you in at
refunding.
the
So
you tell them this is the ARB yield. Yeah.
That's just that's a direction letter to the trustee. You're not hiring a company, right, or a third independent. You don't need a verification report for that, but.
No, it's an investment advisor is what I
Right,
would
but
categorize
but
it.
to buy slugs, do you, on past bond deals, when we've had to do a refunding, don't we just tell the trustee to buy slugs and fund the bonds?
I think we always do our advance refundings negotiated, right? And so that they always effectively
Or
create,
the underwriter does it?
yeah, like
Okay.
DBC kind of creates a portfolio to meet your bond.
Right,
trust.
when if slugs, we have to do the slug test, right? So if slugs are the most efficient,
Right.
then we do that. But if you can gain anything from going open market securities, then you do that. So there was a time that was the case, and then the time that slugs are preferred. There's a test that they run. With this, if you're buying slugs, the difference is that's typically, it's in an escrow agreement and you have one payment. This, when you have a construction contract, I don't know if you're buying, if you're buying a 6-month slug, if you have expenditures in 3 months. That's just an example. I don't know if it's a more definitive expenditure cash flow versus we know you'd have a payment June 1st, June 15th, on a bond
Yeah.
sale.
Well, and I think that's what we were talking about with the draw schedules, right?
Yeah, so we have a draw schedule,
We have a
let's just
draw
say it's kind of $3 million a month. At least that's what we're assuming, that can move around, so you just you'd set a draw schedule sometimes.
That would
a little
cover-
bit. Sometimes maybe even you'd be a little bit conservative by 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, so you had the money ahead of time rather
Right.
than late. But who do we typically use as our bond trustee?
US Bank, right?
Yeah.
US Bank?
I don't know if they do that type of thing. There's other companies, like I said, I can get you
Yeah.
some names. You know, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, they do it. There's Winters and Company, there's Blue Rose, there's companies that do that. That's their specialty, I guess. I don't know what they charge, I don't, you know.
Got it.
But
Well, I
can
guess
get you
there's
names.
two things. Do we think it makes sense to do a little bit of work to see if we could set that up with the trustee where it wasn't additional work on the staff, but we could meet our arbitrage yield? So then we're effectively kind of covering our interest. And then the question is, if we could do that, so we're not penalized for doing a little bit bigger deal, a little bit longer deal, would we ever want to lock in a little bit more of HHR, you know, in the current rate environment versus funding like the last, like kind of 15 to 20?
I mean, we'd have to, Marie Fallon, the bond counsel is gonna ask for a cash flow.
Yeah.
Right, so they try to protect you on those types of things. So if it's within reason, I don't see the problem, but
So the issue though would be whether if we're authorizing a higher principal amount, but we're subject to this analysis, and if the analysis comes back that it doesn't make sense, do we just not issue that amount, or?
Well, you can net fund it like the way we did, like with the premium. So there's a couple different ways you can do it, but.
So the other consideration is, if you do issue more than what we've assumed here, you're gonna have more of a debt service
Yeah.
impact sooner.
Yeah, yes.
But we'll also have more investment earnings that should cover the debt service if we're meeting our arbitrage yield, right?
In theory.
Like, you know, absent like premium coupons and so forth.
The difference being, we have a contractual obligation to pay the interest, and we have no such contractual obligation to receive the interest on the portfolio.
We
That
did.
can change.
Well, we
I'm
do
just
on the
saying
portfolio, because you're
that-
buying.
If you're buying
federal-
slugs,
You're buying
that's-
government guaranteed
How
securities.
how far out?
So generally what you do is you buy one that matures in every single month that you actually need a drawdown.
For how long?
Well,
They can go,
The current
multiple
bond-
years.
Out to 3 years?
Yeah.
no.
This would be like a
This
year.
project only goes through August
Right.
of next year.
You can
26.
buy longer dated slugs.
That's my
Yes.
question.
Yeah, you can buy them out to
Yeah,
30 years.
you can buy them.
So you're locking in the
But we
delta.
would-
you'll know the rate, when you execute that, you'll know the rate for each month of that
But then
slug.
we're
and amount.
refinancing a higher principal amount when we're talking
No, we're talking about this only for the bond, not
only
for
for
the
the
bond.
bonds. Okay.
Only for the long-term debt. The idea is, do we want to issue a little bit more 20-year debt? Normally, you wouldn't want to issue out too far, because then there's negative carry. You're sitting around paying interest, whereas you're
Let me just think this through. We're issuing 20-year bonds. We can protect the first 3 years worth of it, up to the first 3 years worth of interest?
Until you, so what, the idea is when you issue all of it, you
Yeah.
don't spend all of it, so you're incurring the debt on all of it, and if you're invested at the yield, at the same yield as your cost of carry, it's called the bond arbitrage yield.
Yes.
You have no, you're indifferent,
Yes.
because you're not paying
But you
anything for it.
but you can't hedge all 20 years worth
No.
of
Oh, correct,
interest.
no.
You
You're-
can only hedge up to 3 years worth of interest.
You're
You
basically
are
hedging the
allowed-
interest
If we're-
until you use
My
the
point is,
money.
if we're issuing more, we are subjecting more to the interest rate risk beyond which we can.
You
But we have to
are,
raise that debt anyway.
Seven-
Yeah,
17.
we're gonna have to do it next year,
Yeah.
so we don't know if the rates will be higher or lower next year.
So it would just be an offset to what we're issuing later.
It's literally, do we issue, like, round numbers, 45 today, and kind of like 15 to 20 in June, in early 26, or do we just issue all 60 today?
and the other, the one way you talked about doing it is sort of gross funding. The other way that you guys have done it before, the town's done it before, is through, like in refundings, you're net funding the cash flows. So if you know what your draw schedules are for the next 18 months, you are buying a portfolio of slugs equal to your bond arbitrage yield that is the present value of the amount necessary to be available on that draw date for the next year. So you, under that scenario, you're you're getting the savings differently because you're issuing fewer, it's cheaper securities for the same draw schedule, so you're issuing less bonds. So that's the alternative way to think about it. You could do it that way too.
But the slug only yields, like it's sort of an engineered.
It's
yield.
engineered. It's basically, it's designed to match,
We can't exceed?
nope.
You-
Well,
you-
you
you can,
can, but what slugs are designed to do is to match cash flow. Whereas treasuries mature on certain dates, 15th or whatever it is, or the 28th or the last day of the month, slugs are designed to have no float, if you will.
So
And so they blend the yield. It's to make sure you match the bond yield.
what's the acronym stand for?
State and local government securities.
And so
It's the treasury.
what's the credit risk?
It's the federal government.
Yeah. You either buy US Treasuries or you buy municipal securities, which have been defeased with US Treasuries.
Treasuries.
So that's
Got
what it
it.
is. But high level, like in Mark's analysis here, we're assuming the borrowing rate on HHR is 375. So the idea is that we would just be reinvesting at 375. And so we're covering our debt service until Jen's getting the bills, right, from HHR, at which time we're no longer earning the money and we're paying the investment earnings, and we're just then we sort of pay the debt service.
But could we do that next year too?
You could, yeah. The question is,
Are the rates
yeah,
favorable?
is the rate environment right now?
We're
the
still
yield
asking the
curve
same
is-
question, is do we want to do it this year or next
Yeah.
year based on, I mean, are we even talking about what we think rates are doing? Like, we never really have before.
The issue is we're in an environment now where long-term municipal rates are lower than short-term treasury rates. So it allows us to borrow the money and effectively not bear any interest cost until the day that HHR sends us a bill.
Offset our interest costs,
Sorry, offset our
Yeah.
interest cost.
not
yeah.
bear interest costs, offset our interest costs.
Yes.
So we don't know where it's gonna be a year
That
from now,
condition can change,
but
yeah.
that condition is favorable today.
So the
That's
benefit for
that's-
doing this, to issuing a little bit longer as opposed to, the benefit of doing this is that you have all the money in your bucket, and it's not costing you anything to carry it.
Yeah.
And then you draw it down and spend it, and then you've got the debt anyway. Versus if you wanna roll it out in pieces, I don't know where interest rates are gonna be next year. So they could be higher, they could be lower, but the benefit of, it's a known today, what you wanna do. Do you think things are gonna change much in a year? I don't know. I never thought municipalities were in the business of taking bets on interest rates.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
the municipal market tends to move pretty slowly, so I wouldn't, it's not.
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah.
The investment part, is, I guess, second, you make that decision, that's not being made tonight,
Yep.
right? It's being in your mind, tonight is more of, obviously, you're not gonna bond, Great Island, I always wanna call it Great River, Great Island, because those proceeds are already spent, you're just reimbursed, you're just paying the notes off and the money's gone. So that's why the condition is for HHR to do that, so.
So guys, in terms of giving Jen and Mark direction, it sounds like we're all sort of unanimous for rolling the ban for Great Island, that $49 million for another year, in anticipation of doing like a 30-year deal on that next year. We're all in favor of issuing kind of 20-year term debt for the next block of HHR, right? Whether that's kind of 45 million-ish that Jen has in here, or Jen, if we want to raise that up a little bit to deal with the timing of the state funds. We're all in favor of doing that. I think we want to explore if bond counsel, and if we need to bring technically an advisor on, if we can take our proceeds and immediately invest them in slugs and meet our bond yield so that we're not actually carrying interest costs. We're offsetting our interest cost until the time where, we actually get invoices from Jill and Chris, right? We want to try to do that. And I guess the only thing is, if we could do that, if that product worked, would we think about raising a little bit more HHR money, possibly the last 15 million? So we kind of took that interest rate risk off the table.
I think when you do that, there's another unknown to consider. We don't know exactly what the state reimbursement is gonna be.
Yep,
It could be more than we're estimating, in which case we could be over borrowing.
yep.
And we don't know what the final costs are gonna be. They may come in under budget, which again, it could be kind of a double whammy on over
Yep.
borrowing. So I wouldn't be comfortable borrowing all the way up to the appropriation less the estimated state grants at this time.
So then maybe it's not doing all of it, maybe it's just kind of accounting for only half of the state funds, and maybe taking an extra month or so, but not going all the way out through like the last draw, which is August,
Yeah,
right?
and, you know, we just had huge HHR come in, invoices come in, but I think they were maybe 2 months' worth of construction, activity. But what I can do is, for March, we're gonna be meeting, March 11th is our regular meeting. If they finalize amount at that time, does that timing work for us?
Looking for the schedule.
Finalize which amount?
The actual amount that we're gonna
Bond.
Bond.
Because this says discuss, not take action.
Yeah.
So it presumes we could do it in March, but you're
Yeah.
confirming.
Is there any reason?
I mean, if need be, we could always put it on the, what is it, March 4th? That
Yeah,
we
we have
have the budgets get handed over, we could do business then too.
Right, yes.
So is that when you'd want to vote on the bond resolution?
The resolution to sell, yeah, I didn't give you resolution to sell because there was gonna be so many
Yeah.
combinations of things, and I think we'd be driving ourselves crazy and probably end up
Right.
approving the wrong thing. So I wanted to have the discussion, get the direction from you, and then we can have a nice clean resolution to sell that comes to you in March.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm getting the schedule right now has me having a draft out on the 10th, but if it's moving, if it's taking 5 million out or 5 million, you know, we
That's
can,
an easy-
that's easy adjustment, yeah.
Does something like investing with the trustee in slugs, is that something that would require incremental disclosure in the POM
No, I don't think so.
or POS?
No.
Is there any reason from a ratio perspective we don't want to add any more debt this year?
Well, I think that Jen was saying, in terms of, if you want to do a little bit more HHR, there's a possibility for a little bit more, but doing it all could mean that we're over borrowing because either project
I
costs
mean,
come in
from like
underneath.
a ratings agency perspective, like indebtedness and, you know, to bump it up at all. I mean, is there any reason to worry about that?
Well, the 49 million you have to issue, right?
Right.
Like, the HHR, based on the expenditures, you kind of need to issue unless you're going to use cash.
But we're talking about increasing the size of it, right? Or you're saying, sorry.
But it's
the
only,
demands
you're
of
talking
going to
incremental,
long-term.
if you're going 1 month, what is that, 3 million?
You're talking about $3 or $4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It, they know it's all coming. I mean, Moody's
Yeah,
knows
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all coming. They've seen
Yeah.
these scenarios. They've put it all through their system, so.
We should probably check with, if we were to do some type of slugs portfolio with a trustee, does that still get counted towards our Moody's sort of on balance sheet cash?
Probably not, because it's not our cash.
Right.
That new ratio that Moody's is using.
Yeah. I know for well, they can't do advance anymore, but like for current refundings, it doesn't count, but
Right.
I wasn't sure for construction.
So it's
funds.
gonna, it'll be in an escrow, probably not, because you can't
Yeah.
touch
It's
it.
pledged,
Yeah.
it's basically pledged,
Well, I mean, it's available for us to draw down, right?
But I mean, you
Yeah.
can't,
but we can't otherwise.
other
touch it.
cash, you can
Cash is
use.
fungible.
Right.
But this cash isn't,
Yep.
Yeah, this
It's
cash would be.
dedicated.
It would be in a
under
trust, it would be in a
agreement.
fund that's
right.
only
Yeah.
used for that project or
Right.
whatever.
Well, we could also, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't replicate the same investments, not in escrow. Maybe
Yeah.
check Marin with the bond council and see what we kind of can do.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, the town can buy escrows. I mean, slugs, excuse me.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's what
Um,
you're saying, yes.
I don't know how to do it, but it's on it's web-based, right? You can do it. I wouldn't know how to, you'd have to ladder it, and it's probably a little more
Yeah.
complicated than that, but you don't have to be a trustee to buy slugs. That's the moral of the story.
Yep. Okay.
So what I will do is for March, the way I developed the amounts to be bonded was looking at, as of, I think it was January 26th, what had been spent, what our cash surplus or deficit was on any particular project. I can update that for all of the projects, and then we can have a couple scenarios for HHR where we do that, and we assume, you know, we borrow for the full expected state reimbursement. We could assume we borrow one more month on the cash flow projection that they have. We can do a couple different scenarios. And then if it's only HHR that we're kind of fiddling with, it's easy enough to still have a nice, clean resolution to sell.
And then Jen, does it make sense just on your attachment one, the other 2330 that we're looking at bonding? That's on the table here, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's included. And we can update that too. I mean, if there's spending that's occurred on those, since I ran this too, if you want to capture those last few things that we can reimburse ourselves for in this bond issue, we can bump up those amounts.
But that's basically everything in this third column from the right. You all see that?
Yeah, the one recommended amount.
Okay. Okay. Anything else on this we need to talk about?
I think that gives me what I need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Jen,
it.
thank you. Okay, next item is the budget assignments. I mean, I sent this around about a week or so ago. I've since updated, I think I sent around to you all with the RTM members on it. Jack added a column here for all of his F&B members. And then he helped out and added like a third column, or a fourth column, I should say, with different, you know, other RTM committees that are going to be assigned to certain parts of the budget. So as you guys are sort of working through them, just make sure we touch base with.
Can you share that with me, because I don't have the F&B
Okay, yeah, I will.
counterparts?
Yep.
I'll find it and send it to her right now.
Okay.
Go.
Thank you.
Any other questions on assignments here? You know, just in terms of, you guys probably have a couple new topics and I put on here, like including Great Island. It's not a large sort of budget driver, but I just thought given all the debt service that we're paying for that and some of the other things that are kind of coming up, it made sense to, for us to report on that. And then last Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Jen, the board of selectmen reviewed, you know, they divvied their review up into like three different kind of 3-hour plus meetings, and then they ultimately voted on approving that budget on, I think, Wednesday evening, right?
Right.
And, you know, you all should have got the spreadsheet from Jen. Jen, I don't think the master file has been created yet,
Nope.
right?
I was on OpenGov and is it not populated yet?
Yeah, it's in there.
I couldn't get any detail. So I'll come by my laptop and
I'd struggle a little bit.
I couldn't find any, when you scrolled on a department, it would click to a page, but then all the line items, there's no way to get to it. It felt different than it.
Did you watch my video?
It felt different than in years past.
So that's a no.
No, that's correct. But I did read the instructions. I didn't watch the video, but I read the instructions and I got,
So in the Excel file that you have,
yes.
it is a direct export of all the detail from OpenGov. The only thing that's not in there is the very few changes that Board of Finance made.
Board of Selectmen made.
Yeah, sorry, Board of Selectmen. So if you clicked on the tab for general government, it has all of those small departments, all of which are grouped and you can expand, and it goes to the account level, which is grouped and you can expand, and it has all the itemization detail, so you
In
can.
the spreadsheet.
In the
So you
spreadsheet.
don't
This
need,
is-
you're telling us we don't need to
where's the
use
spreadsheet?
OpenGov?
Yeah.
It's
Just
easier to
use
use
the
a
spreadsheet.
spreadsheet.
That's the takeaway. All right,
I
so,
think OpenGov has some of those.
Glory, glory,
write-ups in there, right?
hallelujah.
Right, so what is not in the spreadsheet, as Jim just pointed out, is backup detail, commentary, like for
Right.
Yeah,
the
the
fire
little-
marshal, the document.
But this is
The
what you sent us
docs,
on the
the
third.
PowerPoints
Yes.
that the departments put together.
Yep,
Which are the things I couldn't find.
and there are a couple of documents that The commentaries are more kind of what's going on with the department, that kind of thing. But there are a couple of documents specifically for the fire marshal, because he's requesting a new position, and he has a nice Excel sheet showing how many hours he needs for inspections, how many hours he has available, what the shortfall is, and making a case based on workload for that position. In the finance department, the treasurer has provided some information on her investment income projection, which was recast for the Board of Selectmen. She has her initial one on there, but we have some historical interest information in there too. That's stuff that you won't have in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
Police have a nice detailed overtime analysis attached to theirs. Those are probably the big supporting documents, and the library has their spreadsheet. Is not, we just have their one line in the spreadsheet that I sent, but their whole budget is attached.
Okay.
So
All right.
if you don't want to use it for the detail, I would encourage you to use it for the documents.
No, so I'll, like I said, I'll come by and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
I will tell
Or
you,
I'll watch the video first,
the
so it's not to.
That was the right answer.
Chrome on my old laptop did not allow me to scroll down and see those bottom lines.
Yeah.
And so when I went to Chrome on my desktop, which is
I only
like
have an
10
old
years.
laptop.
So I think the problem is you don't have the latest version of Chrome. Like, it can only upgrade to like 5 years ago, so you may need to get a new computer. Or,
Hey,
Well,
Jen,
with how we're compensated, that's easy.
hey, Jen, you know what I'm gonna ask? Can I get a binder?
No,
No binders.
Yeah, can I get a binder?
Damn!
you can get an empty
I think we
binder.
should go with the old binder.
yeah.
That's a waste.
Just for the record, you guys just put it in the record.
Yeah, like every year.
Like Rob
we gotta
Cardone,
get-
it's for the binder again.
So along the lines of the master budget file, since all of that detail is in the spreadsheet that I sent you, that has all the detail that was in the town administrator's proposed budget. Then there's a summary sheet for Board of Selectmen year over year, the few changes that they made. I can add a Board of Selectmen column on all of the tabs, and most of them are either by large department or by function, like general government, land use, that sort of thing. And we can use that as our master file, and we could roll those up into a summary sheet that maybe just has total department, historical, TA proposed, and then we usually do dollar and percent change, Board of Selectmen dollar and percent change, Board of Finance, and just utilize that one document.
But if you're responsible for a department, you need to go to OpenGov and look at the supporting documentation.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or you're saying the other tabs,
No.
you keep all the tabs that you have and you
Yep.
just link those to like
To a
a
summary.
dashboard or whatever.
Yep.
But you still need the PowerPoint that doesn't exist in the spreadsheet.
For the
does
backup
exist in
documentation.
OpenGov.
Yep.
Right.
And then Jen, in April, when we're voting on this, like if we're making changes, you could still make them in the supporting tabs?
Yeah,
And-
I would rather that we create, so the file that I sent to you that we used to review for Board of Selectmen worked very well for review. So I could see us using that in the past. And rather than having spent all that time to create that, and now, yeah, we're done with that, let's recreate something else. I would love to just keep updating it throughout the whole process and just use one kind of base file. So we can, in that link to the dashboard, it can calculate down to mill rate and all those things that we normally have down at the bottom. And then we can have a model, we can add in the tab that we usually have for looking at fund balance scenarios. We can add in some of those other worksheets that we had in our master file to look at some of those other things that Board of Selectmen doesn't have to look at.
Okay.
So what I will do is at least get you the updated with the Board of Selectmen column, put in the few changes into the actual department tabs, and I'll send that back out.
Okay. And then Jen, on things other than like the two budgets, the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen budget, in terms of some of the other things, like when we were talking about where the guidance back in November, some of the other big drivers were grand list. Was that finalized end of January?
Yep.
Any material movements in that?
Just under 0.5% increase.
Okay.
0.5% increase? just under 0.5%, is that what you said?
0.50, yeah. I think it came in at like 0.46%.
Okay,
Yeah.
half of 1%.
We had 1% in as
Yeah,
one
and
of our.
it was lower than that.
Okay, and then I think, and then there were, the other ones were like surpluses, is it too early to tell? Like outside of like things like investment earnings that are coming in ahead of budget?
I don't have a projection at the moment, no.
Okay,
That's normally something that we do for, at the end of March and get you the latest and greatest. I don't have time right now wearing two hats to do it now and then again for the end of March. But we'll have that for your early April meetings.
Thanks.
The one thing that we will have in, for your March meeting is the closeout of RFC and RE projects. So we'll know how much is going back into your capital contingency account there.
and then in terms of other bonding, any of the things that are, the large things that are floating through the budget, Pear Tree Point, Weed Beach, and one fire truck, is it?
One fire truck and the NHFD retaining wall.
None of those would be included in this bonding?
No.
So we'd fund those
None
with
of those are
cash?
authorized yet. So something like Pear Tree that'll get up and running probably in the fall. The general fund would front the cash and then we would reimburse ourselves come April. But we can't borrow for them yet because they're not even authorized.
That's another 15 to 16 million, right? Those four.
Those four, yeah. I think it came out to about 16.
Yeah, and I think when there are a few of the flooding projects that are floating around, and so I feel like in terms of
Those are pretty-
things getting, those are pretty meaty, like in terms of, how much we're borrowing against the general fund, like do you think there could be a scenario where we would have to fund or go to market before March or April next year?
I don't think so, but I do think that that may bolster the case for borrowing a little bit more for HHR. Because we know that those will be drawn down. And if we have these other ones that are gonna be draws against the general fund, we don't also wanna blow through all of our bond funds on HHR and have to be drawing from the general fund also. So I think that's a
Jen,
very good consideration.
if we do our over borrow, like HHR comes in a little bit under budget, or the state grants are higher than what we expect, we can always take some of those bond proceeds and move them to another. Does it need to be a school project, or could it be a town project, or is that a lot of work to reclassify?
It can be, it's easiest to do it to another school project, which we don't have really anything significant authorized at the moment. That's easiest just because all of our debt service schedules are already town, school, sewer. But there's nothing that says it can't go to a town project. And then we just kind of have to recast the debt schedule.
Okay.
Have we done that before? We've moved bond proceeds from one bond issue where we thought it was for, and then we ended up.
Between like school and town,
Yeah.
or just because we had excess
Do you get an
proceeds?
opinion on that? Does your bond counsel like opine that, yes, this is fine?
I don't think we've done that in the time that I've been here.
Okay. That's a good
It's always been
question.
school to school, town to
Yeah,
town.
because we've always had enough
Right.
going on for either category. But I will check with Marie on that, because
Yes.
that may help us maybe pull back a little bit on
It is town
HHR.
property, right?
It is,
But-
and I think
As long as
it
the
would be
language
allowed,
in
because
the
it's
OS
their authorized projects. I think it's to any other authorized project, but I'll just double check and confirm.
I think, isn't one of the reasons we need to keep it separate, because I think, and Paul might know, but I think when the schools report their like average
Yeah, we
spending
have to tell
per
them what
student,
we cover
right?
as debt service.
You have to
for them.
report like school debt service, and even
Mhm.
some of the school charges like SRO and those
Yep.
things, those in-kind services.
What you just adjust that number if the bonds were repurposed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
that's why, I think that's one of the reasons why we need to track them, right?
Mhm.
I'm more specifically want to make sure that when you disclose in your OS that you're issuing bonds for a specific purpose and then you don't use them for that purpose, that we have an opinion that says that it's,
Acceptable.
of equal use, right, where we're in the,
Yeah.
which I think it's fine, but I just would,
I think with GO, it's okay. I
With
think when you're
GOs.
not doing GO, then
Yeah,
it gets a
right.
little bit.
Yep, I'll confirm with Marie.
Okay.
trust but verify.
Okay, so financial report?
Give me 1 second.
Financial report, the January tax collection period has us pretty much right in line with where we've been in prior years. Versus the 5-year average, we're a little bit less, but overall, the tax collector is very comfortable with where our collection rate is. Investment income through December, we had collected just under 2.3 million on a $3.3 million budget, so we will definitely meet our budget this year, and I assume we're gonna have some excess. On expenditures in the general fund, the first one, really the only one I wanted to call your attention to is on page 2, right in the middle, legal counsel. That is definitely running hot for our general counsel. Since October, we've been spending about $65,000 per month on legal. We do expect that we're going to have surplus funds in the regulatory council, in the land use section. So you'll see a transfer next month to move from some from regulatory to general counsel. But this may be one, depending on how that run rate goes, if some of these don't get resolved soon and if they continue at the same rate, we might be dipping into contingency for that.
And Jen, do these this legal counsel, does this cover any of the stuff on Great Island?
It
Is some of that
covers
in here?
the 23A tree.
Yep.
It covers some other large capital project legal expenses.
Jim, back to revenues for a second. Are we worried about building permits hitting our number?
I'm not worried about the redevelopment portion because they will be pulling their permits. The feel is that it'll be sometime in the spring for the next kind of big round of permits for them. What building and P&Z have noticed, and they're not quite sure why, but kind of that base permit revenue or activity is lower than it has been in prior years.
On the legal counsel, you said that some of it has to do with capital projects.
Mhm.
Typically, that would be capitalized, I would think, unless there's something
Yeah,
extraordinary
I have to
going
go
on.
through and see historically where things have been charged. Because one question arose today on the newest bill, and I was a little surprised.
Okay, all right.
Jen, is there anything that we should be passing at least a small bond resolution for in anticipation to be able to capitalize any of these?
No.
Okay.
Really nothing else that I wanted to highlight on the general fund. State revenues on the town side are all coming in as expected. I think we've already had some discussion about excess cost.
Question, has anybody, Paul, have you done the math? If Governor Lamont's proposal to add, what, 50 million to the fund?
It's not in this year,
It's not this,
and that's not next year either, it's in 26, 27.
okay, so that would, okay, so that answers the question with respect to this number and next year's number. What's the total pot now, and what's he trying to take it to? Is it like one?
It's 181 million, and last year, the claims against that were 263 million. And the average outplacement cost, at least the institutional cost, went up like 7.7% year to year.
So the claims will continue to rise. This, if he was successful, would close the gap demonstrably, but not entirely.
Correct.
Okay.
And Paul, I thought the first year that this budget, wouldn't it cover fiscal year 26?
Not my understanding, it's 26, 27.
Okay.
And it has a legislative process to go through. Right,
Oh, yeah.
all right, thank you. You did
Contin-
answer my question, so there you
Well,
go.
but there's a significant shortfall in the ECR we'll get this year.
No, yeah, 40.
Yeah, 59.9,
59.9 or
and
something like
that's,
that. Right.
Contingency is healthy, we have just over $174,000 in there. At the moment, I don't see any potential big draws from that except for legal. On the other funds, they're all doing very well. Nothing of note. Active bonded projects, things are progressing as expected. This was kind of the starting point for what we need to issue for, so this is where we track what we have going on and what we need to issue for. Great Island, we spent just under $70,000 in the last month. A few of the more significant expenses, the 23A widening are currently on hold. I think some of the remediation is underway, and we do expect to fully expend the balance of what we have appropriated. So we have about $4.5 million unspent at the moment. And I don't know if it was the way I printed it or the way that I PDF'd it, but I don't have the ARPA report on here. ARPA's going along well. There was one little oddity where we're over by $70 on one account, so I have to go back through and reconcile that. And then we have one purchase where we had a quote and we encumbered and obligated the funds based on that quote, and when it was delivered and invoiced, they charged us about $1,000 less. So now I have to go through Treasury's documents and find out if we can reallocate that to something else or if we have to turn back this $1,000.
When did you get that notice? Before, after December 31st?
Like last week. When it came in, the Public Works was like, so what do we do about this?
oops.
So I know at one point Treasury was saying if you obligated it for one purpose, you cannot shift it to anything else. I don't know if they've softened on that, or if they may soften on that because people were obligating based on quotes for orders. I don't know. But that's a little.
A lot of action on
oddity.
Treasury nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't know if anybody's there to answer a question.
We'll give it some time.
But ARPA is doing well. The projects that we had remaining that we moved money into and kind of cleaned up, those are progressing. The big one is the sewer I&I, and then the couple of drainage projects. They've had some expenditures, and then we're really just waiting on the 4 hybrids and the park and rec truck. Those are the big ones.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Jen.
we're gonna push minutes, right, till next week?
Yep. Or till next meeting.
Next meeting. And our next meeting is gonna be,
The 4th is the hearing and the 11th is the meeting.
correct.
The 4th is
The
the
special
turnover of the budgets. The 11th is your public hearing and your
okay.
regular meeting.
Yeah.
We combine those so that you don't just show up for just the public hearing.
So should we plan on, at this point, you don't think we need to have incremental work besides receiving the budgets? On the 4th?
No, because I think, based on what Mark said, the 11th,
Yeah.
what we could do is maybe I put together kind of the preview of where the
Let's do that.
HHR stuff. We'll do that on the 4th, and that
Yeah.
way we know on the 11th, we can have the resolution itself ready to
Yeah,
approve.
let's discuss.
And then
that.
I can even tell Mark, this is the sense of the board, I don't expect any changes, and he can start updating his stuff based on that.
Okay. Special assignments? Rob, anything HHR?
HHR, on time, on budget at this point, got some change orders coming in, but I don't think anything significant. So some internet traffic back and forth, some things, but nothing really to speak of. Dispatcher's contract, I guess, is done. I missed the last meeting, sorry, it was sick. But we're done, so but we're not ready to turn it over to the board yet for final approval. And on audit, did we ever schedule a time with the partner?
We did not.
Are we ships crossing the night here? Just send Jim and I a note, and we'll make some time for the partner there. But the audit's done, as if you guys remember from last meeting, so it's just a matter of signing off on it.
I think, is Malin on audit as well?
I think we added her, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you can send a note, just a reminder, if they have some times, we'll make some time to talk to their partner. You guys were happy with the work, if I remember right, Jen?
Yep.
And the team? Audit dispatchers and HR, that's all I mean, man.
A quick update on Great Island, we have a meeting on Thursday night. If you haven't seen, the committee voted on what we call like the vision plan, which was, I would almost describe as sort of a halfway point between when we started looking at what we will ultimately do to Great Island, how we'll have sort of open it up, and in terms of what it could be. It's sort of a halfway point between that and the master plan, which should be done in July, which will map out sort of what we're thinking in terms of the type of programming, the type of facilities, the type of sort of navigation around the island and so forth. So I think our consultants have been great. If you look at the proposal, if you look at the presentation, I think it's worth you all looking at. It's beginning to formulate some ideas about what could happen on different parts, but I think now we're exploring what's feasible, what the costs are, and kind of how the staging would work.
Is there any private funding in the conversation?
So yes and no. No private funding has necessarily been committed or accepted. There are a lot of people that have, I think, sort of reached out with different types of ideas and willingness to support. And I think as we begin to kind of formulate more around what that master plan looks like and what we think is sort of possible and where the committee and ultimately Board of Selectmen are headed, I think you'll begin to see more, hopefully, more interest in people supporting it.
Great, thanks.
Governance, the concept of governance is also coming together as you guys.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussions around
Yeah.
that. I think, right now, it's basically town-owned property under the control of all the decisions are made by the Board of Selectmen. GIAC kind of makes recommendations to them, but it all falls underneath them. I think generally the discussion, from our consultants has been to the extent and if more private funds begin to become available, you can begin to sort of move away from that and or incorporate more sort of outside input on the governance. But I think now, given that everything's kind of 100% taxpayer funded,
Right.
it remains fully under the
You can
control.
only
of the
act
Board
on
of
what's
Selectmen.
presenting, right?
What?
So you can only act on what's presenting, so if
Yeah.
there's nothing to really, a public-private partnership will evolve, hopefully as the vision becomes more crystallized, right?
Yeah, 23A, is on hold pending the review of the tree warden's appeal. And that, is in process. It can take weeks or it can take months.
Okay.
Today I was made aware of the passing of Kevin Newman in late January. For those of you who don't know, Kevin served on Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen from the late 1980s to, I think it was 2007, and I took his place on the board. He was a sharp mind and a acerbic wit, and he was never short on opinion. And he was a credit to this town, and as Alex Davidson has said when he was chair of the RTC, I'm always surprised when we need somebody qualified to volunteer pops up, and Kevin was one of those volunteers.
Thank you.
Thanks. Paul, anything on updates on pension?
No, ECR and public benefits are bothering me.
Got it.
Because public benefits will expire hopefully in April, and they have a 25% to 30% impact on my electric budget in Trumbull, and they would have a impact here because it wasn't budgeted or announced prior. And ECR, I'm taking a $250,000 haircut this year on what I can expect, and we've been budgeted about 1.9 million, so I'm in the hot seat.
It seemed like on some of the language around the additional ECR funds that the government was contemplating making available, there was also some, it seemed like there was some support or weighting towards in-district, being able to deliver more in-district services.
Put it this way, every superintendent and probably every Board of Ed has put pressure on their legislators to make a change.
Thank you, everybody knows.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Chairman's report, nothing. I would just mention that in terms of budgets, Board of Selectmen voted last Wednesday. The Board of Ed is having a meeting right now, so they should be voting on that budget and will ultimately come present that to us in 2 weeks. Okay,
Is that your chairman's report?
that's it. Any new business? Agenda review? Okay, accept the motion to adjourn. Rob moves, Jenny seconds. All those in favor? Unanimous. Stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Good, 75.
Thanks, Jen.